I know people say you shouldn't hate anything, but I'm pretty sure those people have never spent quality time with a jigsaw. And by quality time, I mean slowly losing your will to live, one wobbly cut at a time. It doesn't take a woodworking genius to realize that blade flex is one of the biggest issues with a jigsaw. But luckily for us, the internet is full of miracle fixes and self-declared experts with the cure to all that ails us. From a jig with a butt ton of views that promises the world, to blades they claim will fix everything, to some cold hard truth, it might not be the tool. It might maybe, just maybe, be you.
Nah, definitely not that last one.
If nothing works, well, maybe after 15 years, I need to buy a new jigsaw. Alright, first things first. Let's see what a basic jigsaw can actually do. No fancy blades, no upgrades, just the regular setup straight out of the toolbox.
If you've never used a jigsaw before, think of it like the poor man's bandsaw.
Its main use is for cutting curves, small detailed cuts, and creating holes. A bandsaw definitely can't do this. But unlike a bandsaw, the jigsaw is not the tool you go to for long, straight cuts, especially in thicker woods. You can cut thin metal or plastic with the right blade, but let's be honest, most of us are going to be using it on softwood, hardwood, plywood, or some other kind of sheet good. Here's a general rule of thumb. For softwood, you're good up to 1.5 inches. For hardwood, keep it 3/4 of an inch or under, or start emotionally preparing for a bad time.
So apparently I'm all about a bad time, but that's mainly because I don't own a bandsaw.
When cutting curves in thicker wood, the blade will want to flex, resulting in a beveled edge instead of a straight cut. I'm not out here chasing perfect 90-degree cuts, but this nearly 45-degree monstrosity is not cutting it.
Now that you witnessed the just wing it approach in all of its glory, let's talk about how you can actually get some good results with a little thing called technique. For our test, we're going to go ahead and use material that you would normally use a jigsaw for. But to really test the internet, we're not going to go and use any little flimsy boards.
We are going to use 3/4 inch plywood, a chunky 1.5 inch pine board, and some 8/4 inch thick hardwood.
Because we ain't scared of no ghost.
Or pushing things to their limit. To keep this test as legit as possible, I made a template to recreate each cut as accurately as I can.
Now, if you've been on the internet long enough, you've probably heard the saying, you just don't know how to use insert tool here. Unfortunately, the peanut gallery isn't always wrong.
It's kind of like when IT asks you if you're sure your computer is plugged in. It sure feels like a dumb question until that one time it's not. So before we go blaming the tool, let's make sure it's not us. This will also allow us to set a baseline for the rest of the testing we do. Before you even pull the trigger, make sure your base plate is set to 0. The base plate can be angled to make up to 45-degree cuts, but I rarely use this feature. Just like some people and a turn signal. It's perfectly fine to let others know you're taking a right turn at a 4-way stop. It isn't information that you need to keep private.
Jigsaw blades are a lot like shrimp. Where was I? Oh yeah. You got your general purpose blades, you got your fast cut blades, you got your fine finish blades, you got your thick metal blades, your medium metal blades, your thin metal blades, your laminate blades, your tile blades, your fast cut blades, your curved blades, your straight blades, your top and bottom blades, your reverse blades, your scroll saw blades. That's about it.
Most blade packaging will tell you what materials they're best for and let you know the TPI, teeth per inch. If you're cutting construction lumber and you want it cut fast, go with a low TPI blade. Big teeth, fast cuts, rough edges. If you're aiming for a smooth, clean, precise cut, then you'll want a high TPI blade. More teeth equals a cleaner cut. For our test, we will use a fine finish blade with a TPI of 10 for the plywood and pine, as I want the cleanest and most precise cuts. But for the hardwood, we are going with a general purpose blade, mainly because the fine finish blade is not long enough. A jigsaw blade should be about 1 inch longer than the material being cut. Depending on your jigsaw, things might be slightly different, but there are typically 2 speed options. There is this orbital setting, which goes from 0 to 3. Set to 0, the blade goes up and down. This makes for a cleaner, more precise cut, especially for curves and with thinner hardwoods. Now, the higher you set it, the more aggressively the blade will move forward on the upcut, which will lead to a faster cut. This can be very helpful for rough straight cuts or when cutting thick materials. So, a more aggressive cut means tear out and less control. And the blade has a better chance of flexing, especially on curved cuts.
With all that information in hand, we're going to go ahead and set the orbit to 0. That way we can get the cleanest and most precise cuts.
Then you have the variable speed setting. As tempting as it is to push the jigsaw to its limits, a higher speed setting can lead to excessive friction and heat, potentially burning the wood or damaging the blade, especially with denser hardwoods. Start with a medium speed setting and gradually increase it if needed, while paying attention to the wood's reaction. If you encounter resistance or burning, reduce the speed. For thicker hardwoods, a slower speed is generally recommended for better control and to prevent the blade from wandering.
No matter what Allen Iverson says,
We're talking about practice, man. I mean, how silly is that?
practice with different speeds and orbital settings on some scrap wood so you can dial in your jigsaw.
Allowing the saw blade to reach its full speed before engaging the workpiece helps prevent bouncing and kickback. Let the blade do the work while keeping your hands steady for better control. Pushing the saw into the cut too fast unconsciously applies pressure to the side of the cut, which can cause the blade to flex. Slow and steady wins this race. Be like the tortoise and not the hare.
Full transparency, this is one of those things that are easier said than done. Again, it takes practice.
Here's how the results are going to work. Each cut was made on a 24-inch board, and I'll be measuring 5 points along the cut: the beginning, the end, and these 3 spots in between. I'm going to use a machine square and a digital angle finder to capture blade flex at each point. For each test, I'll provide the blade's TPI, the orbital setting, the variable speed setting, and the highest, lowest, and average blade flex. Feel free to hit pause if you want to dig into the numbers.
Remember when I said this?
We're going to go ahead and set the orbit to 0.
I ditched orbital setting 0 pretty fast. Not for the plywood, but definitely for the pine and hardwood. For the pine, I had to bump it up to 1 because life's too short to spend an entire afternoon on a single 24-inch curved cut. And for the hardwood, I had to bump it up to 2 before I cranked it up to 3. Otherwise, I'd still be making this same cut and probably questioning my life choices. So that just wing it cut I made about 9 months ago. Yeah, turns out a little technique goes a long way. That is about a 64.1% difference.
Now that we have a baseline, we can go ahead and make our miracle jig and see if we can skip all the learning curves that come with this.
So here's the basic premise of this jig. Your cuts without it. Garbage. Your cuts with it. Beautiful.
Simple enough. Let's go ahead and build it and see if it's actually true.
From the original video, it looks like they're using a 1/2 inch or 20 millimeter piece of oak. I'm using plywood instead because here in Texas, with the humidity, a thin board living outside isn't likely to stay flat for long. To make the slot for the blade, I installed the blade backwards and used the pieces of wood I'd glued down as a guide. Now, this part took a few tries, as the blade kept wanting to drift and pull away from the jigsaw. Here's what I learned. I needed to crank the speed up to full and make the cut slowly. No orbital setting. Trust me, keep it off for this. Now look, I desperately want this jig to be the cure-all to my jigsaw blues. But I don't exactly feel super optimistic about it. I just don't see it solving the blade deflection problem. I want to love this tool. I really do. It's useful, it's versatile. It should be a must-have in any workshop. But every time I use it, it finds a new way to let me down. Depending on your router's base, you'll probably need to tweak the jig a bit to fit your setup. Not a big deal, just something to keep in mind. So right away, I see some problems. I can't see my cut line. At all. Sawdust builds up fast and completely blocks my view. Second, the extra thickness means I'm going to have to use a general purpose blade for the pine. There was a moment I pushed too hard on the plywood as I got distracted because I couldn't see the cut line. But even with that, we still ended up with a 58.5% better cut. For the pine, I didn't obsess over staying perfectly on the line. I just focused on keeping even pressure, not forcing the jigsaw or trying to steer it too much, and it paid off. That is an improvement of 39.3%.
Okay, that was impressive.
For the oak, I started with the orbital setting at 0, then bumped it up by 1 every 6 inches, or about 152 millimeters, if that's your thing. It took 2 minutes and 21 seconds to make that initial cut. At that pace, a full 24-inch cut would have taken around 10 minutes. Now, cranking up the orbital setting definitely made the cut faster, but it also made the blade flex more, especially in the curves. But I'm not about to complain about a cut improvement of 28%.
Let's go ahead and kick this can down the road and ask the question, did we waste our time making this jig? And maybe we should just bought better blades.
Some folks swear that a quality blade is the key to success with a jigsaw. So let's put that theory to the test. Here are our contenders. First up, Maketh, who supposedly makes the best jigsaw that money can buy, at least according to the internet, and it'll set you back a cool $800. Yep, you heard that right, $800. So by default, their jigsaw blades must be the best, right?
Side note, I did ask them if they could send me one of their $800 jigsaws to, test and return. And their answer was no. Completely understandable.
Our second contender is going to be Festool. Okay, so that is a problem I didn't see coming. It doesn't fit in my jigsaw. I went to Home Depot to see if this was just my jigsaw being picky, or if other saws had the same issue. Turns out it's not just an old jigsaw problem, as the blade didn't fit in this rigid saw either. Something to keep in mind, Festool's straight cut blade is thicker than most. Instead, we're substituting in a blade that one enthusiastic person told me is legit. Bosch. Bonus points, it's labeled for hardwood, and most importantly, it fits my jigsaw. Here's our first contender, Maketh. Better than just using technique alone, but still not quite as good as the Jig results. And at $5.22 per blade, yeah, I expected better. And then there was Bosch, and all it did was absolutely wreck everyone with a 0.32 flex average. It got 00 twice. Yeah, I don't think it gets much better than that. Coming in at a price of $2.67 a blade. Bosch takes the win for plywood, hands down. For the pine, Maketh did fine, if we're only comparing it to the technique results. But once again, it couldn't overcome the power of the Jig. Bosch had zero trouble tearing apart the technique results. It was neck and neck with the Jig, but Bosch still pulled out a narrow victory. The Bosch blade is clearly thicker than the Maketh blade, which leads me to believe it is part of the reason it is kicking so much butt and taking all the names. Now, this is where things get interesting. When cutting the hardwood with the Maketh blade, the vibrations were horrible. You can even see it in my hand. And it definitely shows in the numbers. It was a pain to cut with, and by far the worst cut of the video. Then, here comes Bosch, and it didn't do much better, which surprised me. The general purpose blade I used in the first two tests actually performed better. It was hard to tell that the Bosch was supposed to be designed for hardwood. But overall, in this showdown of better blades, Bosch still made a clean sweep for the win.
The hardwood results left a sour taste in my mouth. So let's do like the Planeteers and let our powers combine.
We are going to see how the Jig performs with a Bosch blade. I decided not to retest the plywood because honestly, those results were as good as I'm worried about getting. So how did the combination of the Jig and the best blade go? Pretty good. Here's the result from the previous best pine cut. The power of Bosch and the Jig combo is strong with this one. Now on to the hardwood, or better known as the real reason I wanted to test the combo. We definitely saw the big improvement we were hoping for, but how did it stack up against the previous best oak cut? It was better, but I'll admit I kind of cheated, if you can call it that. I stayed on orbital setting 1 the whole cut, and it only took a little over 6 minutes to make the cut. But hey, a win's a win.
All right, now after all that testing, what's the verdict?
If you are struggling with your cuts, make the Jig. It actually works. And pair it with better blades if you're cutting thicker materials. But if you don't want to take the time to make a Jig, then I recommend you trying out Bosch blades, better cuts. At least most of the time.
But what do you guys think? Do you have a jigsaw that actually works? Do you guys have some tricks that I didn't try? Let me know in the comments below. I'm Joseph with 5 Duck Studio. I hope to see you next time. Wouldn't be the same without you. I don't know why I thumbs up. I don't know why I did that. I'm sorry. Or if you like it, it's okay. Thumb up, I guess. Subscribe.